right now is the time for retailers to be looking to what they need to achieve to ensure short-term success during the pandemic, but also longer-term success for the future. So I think, for many retailers, I think there's an obvious split between digital and physical retail. And I think when we talk about high street retailers, we're typically talking about the physical high street, And I think the challenges those guys are facing are, primarily around the fact that their competition, the digital retail base, have far lower overheads. They're able to offer far increased margins to themselves and their shareholders, and cheaper prices to the customer. So I think there are a number of challenges facing the high street right now that we're seeing some fairly obvious outcomes because of.
Yeah, and that raises a really interesting point, I think, because that clearly shows how the gap is widening between kind of digital retailers and those who still are determined to kind of have that high street presence. And I think one of the really interesting challenges that people are going to start coming up against is those really strong digital retailers such as ASOS, Mr. Porter. What they've got to find ways to do is almost bring that shopping experience and that brand aesthetic that you get from going somewhere to like Topshop or Selfridges into that digital space. And at the same time, high street retailers need to find ways to create a more digital and transient experience across multiple platforms.
Some of the AR stuff, where some of the retailers are showing kind of bigger ticket items, so things like sofas, for instance, or furniture that you might want to buy online, just seeing it in situ in your own living room or your own kitchen or whatever, like that's a really interesting it's not new, it's been around for a while, but more retailers are starting to do that kind of thing. I think that's quite a positive thing for consumers if you're going to try to understand.
It begins to open up really interesting ways to contextually get the consumer to understand what they're purchasing, because obviously that's always been a bit of a challenge on websites. Is you'll land on a PLP page and you'll get an image a lifestyle image at the top of the screen, and actually that's quite a nice way to begin to tackle that challenge, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite widespread as well, because it's even touching on makeup. As a girl shopping at the moment, when I haven't been able to go onto the high street, test products, the fact that you can look at products online now, get a skin match, things like that, I think they've really come along quite far. And it's going to be a while before we're back into our normal shopping habits. So the fact that they have started to address these changes to allow shopping to be much easier.
So the other day I was trying the Specsavers glasses try on, which again is an AR solution. It's pretty well implemented. It works quite well, but the scaling is off. So the fact that everyone's head isn't the uniform size becomes a bit of a problem. So I think some of the AR solutions that we're seeing in retail context are definitely a step in the right direction, and they are useful. They're not quite the entire solution just yet.
But don't the retailers want to try to innovate through digital as much as possible to try and reduce the amount of returns that they get? It's about 60% is standard or something, isn't it, for online retailers?
Yeah, well, I think that's where the ASOS example is really good. So ASOS, initially had a problem with a lot of returns. They were getting a lot of items returned, and there was also that situation of people buying them, wearing them for a night and then sending them back again. So they had a number of different issues around returns, but it was an undeniable business expense. And I think building, understanding that people want to try on the clothes, they want to see the texture, they want to see the colour, they want to see the fit, and rather than saying, well, we're an online retailer, so you kind of can't do that with us, they switched it around. They changed the proposition, so they allow you to return your items. They don't just allow you to, they actually facilitate it. They provide you the shipping labels, the return process is really simple.
And has anyone seen what Selfridges are doing now? Where actually they're renting clothes, so you can now rent clothes from Selfridges, which is something that's never really been done before at a kind of mass scale.
Yeah.
And that that combined with what we're seeing even in like the gaming industry, where Burberry are now selling clothes that your kind of characters or avatars can wear in games such as Fortnite, is just kind of crazy. And I think it's almost important for people like us to be able to take a step back and understand, not just trying to replicate what has existed on the high street for the past 50 years, but actually look at what ownership means to consumers.
I think so, especially at the moment where none of us have been going out. So rental, I think, is quite pivotal right now, because if you do have that one-off event, maybe you don't want to be spending £500 on an item. So the fact that you can rent it and return it, but still feel like you had that special night out, I think it's addressing the problem and giving people what they want, but also allowing them to kind of not have to spend the money during these difficult times.
There are certainly lots of gaps that the digital channels can help to fill.
Yeah, an industry crying out for digital transformation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's been a lot of change as well. For if you take the department stores that are all really struggling quite a bit. So Debenhams this week, the smaller boutiques, like the brands, the concessions that they have, they've lost a channel to market.
Yeah.
They don't have their own retail physical presence very often. So they spend a lot of time investing in their brand, and they have their own websites, but they're going to have to pick it up a gear, aren't they?
Yeah.
If they're going to have to sell more direct to consumer.
Especially
that's
when
probably
they
true of every
previously
brand.
might have relied on someone just walking past their concession
Yeah.
and not necessarily have targeted them particularly, but now they have to specifically target people and get them through the door,
Yeah.
whereas they might have just been a one-off purchase
And now they've got to
beforehand.
worry about traffic, whereas
Exactly.
before it's all
Yeah.
about it's just experience.
True.
But you've got to get people in there in
Yeah.
the first place now and compete for that, kind of digital presence as much. The experience has got to be spot on as soon as you arrive, because you won't have heard of the brand
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's that kind of department store model. When the internet first kind of became available to most people, everyone kind of had their own website and brands had their own sites. Now, over time, that did kind of transform a bit. And brands that have their own physical stores, then you kind of accepted they would have their own site. Brands that you would find in another store, so in a concession, you expected to still find in that concession's website. But the opportunity to create your own presence did happen. There was a window where we actually saw a lot of brands trying to become, oh no, well actually we're our own brand now and we have digital presence. Didn't do it particularly well, and therefore it kind of didn't work out for them. You can think of a few key examples, and I think there is a real risk to not doing things properly when you consider your digital channels. And I think the insight and data that you have in order to kind of prove the business case before making those decisions is really, really critical, which is why we always, try and find out absolutely as much as we can about the way the business operates, not just about the digital channel thereafter.
And Ben mentioned earlier the commercial aspect to it. You've got to weigh up the possibility of what to do from a digital point of view. What sort of sales you think you could actually deliver online, that kind of thing.
Precisely, because that's exactly what Debenhams did, right? So I know this isn't part of the conversation, right? But that's exactly what Debenhams did, and they did say last time they looked rocky a couple of months back, they said we might actually just close all stores and go entirely online. However, they had done nothing to ensure that they had a good online presence. So they had a store, but that was never going to be enough, and so it's proved. Yeah. So I think it isn't just a case of make sure you do digital right. It's actually so broad, but digital is definitely a big part of what you need to get right.
How do they know what is right?
Yeah, that's the question. So I think this is where it comes down to the way in which we assess the specific needs of an individual retailer and their specific market as well. Which I think it does differ. It is different. There isn't a kind of blanket answer. It's about gathering the right insight, understanding the way the business works, that particular business works, not just the sector. And I think it's that specificity that's going to enable businesses to get it right, not just follow the leader kind of approach.
It's picking up on the idea of actually what does retail mean to consumers, and actually working with retailers to define propositions that work for them as a business that can then be delivered in a digital space.